Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we're going to be going over the Surging Sparks buy list. Pre-releases are underway, and we're going to get playing with these cards just after the LAIC. So let's get straight into it, starting with the core essentials then. These are going to be cards that are expected to be involved in either tier 1 or 2 contenders, or have obvious future potential. Starting in the top left, we have Pikachu EX. This is possibly the best Terrestrial Pokemon that Miraidon players can insert into their deck, replacing the Mewtwo EX, which is basically a useless card, because Pikachu has that really helpful ability that can allow it to tank, and it also only has a 1 retreat cost, which is a big improvement on Mewtwo. So already, just get 2 copies if you like playing the Miraidon archetype, but also its attack is versatile and powerful. It does have that really awkward cost of Grass, Lightning, and Metal, of course, but there's all sorts of ways we can try and make this work. There's Mirage Gate, there's Crispin, there's Sparkling Crystal, there's Energy Switch, Teal Mask Ogerpon, there's even Blissey Trumpet possibilities with Pikachu. There's so many synergies, but there's going to be a way to make this attack work, and it dishes out 300 damage, which is a pretty solid payoff. And if you're really wanting to build around Pikachu, you could even think about getting a 3rd copy. Moving on to Latias EX then, it has a really helpful ability, that Skyliner, which gives basic Pokemon no retreat. This is a really space-efficient way that we can move around our Pokemon for, again, the likes of Miraidon, Raging Bolt, Roaring Moon, although it already has Pecharunt, and even possibly some Energy Switch Ogerpon archetypes coming out from this set. The main benefit being that you just save so much space, compared to needing like Prime Catcher plus double switch cards, sometimes even things like Penny in the list. Now, provided you have enough bench space, you can just use this card. There are still downsides to this because Switch Card is still a good way to offset some math, especially up against the likes of Dragapult. And if you respect Snorlax as an archetype, you may still need those physical switching cards rather than having a no retreat cost that still get affected by block. Next up we have Sylveon EX. Now I know we rated this one really poorly in our set review, but it's basically here on a technicality. I actually think Eevee is the card that screams future potential to me. It can evolve the turn you play it, and the Eevee itself is a colourless Pokemon, so you have Glass Trumpet's energy to power up this Pokemon. So if we are getting new Eevee evolutions in the future, this Sylveon can use its Angelite attack in like an Eevee toolbox approach, and that's where I think it's going to be very strong. I also think there's an outside chance that this could work just already in like a Lost Box archetype, for example, but there aren't really many results for this card just yet. That being said, we've seen the Angelite attack on a previous GX attack, on a very playable Sylveon GX actually back in the day, so there is precedent for this attack to see play. Next up, I recommend getting 3 copies of Magneton. That Overvolt Discharge is certainly one way to power up Pikachu EX, but it could also just make its way into a regular Miraidon, making it much easier to get Iron Hands, or simply just have another follow-up attacker. Of course, by giving the opponent a prize card with your ability, you then open up things like Countercatcher, and possibly even forcing Briar, once again looking at that Pikachu because it's a terrestrial Pokemon. Yeah, just a lot of synergy here, very solid card. And Dustoir's proof of concept that manipulating the prize race by forcing your opponent to take prizes has tremendous upside in this format. Next up we have Rotom. Again, I didn't rate this necessarily too highly, but it screams potential with that crushing pulse, forcing the opponent to reveal their hand, and you can discard all item cards and tools you find there. The lightning cost on Rotom is the main thing holding me back, because you have to build around this quite substantially to make it work. But there's no doubt this is a powerful discard effect that can be used in controlling archetypes, or archetypes that regularly splash in lightning regardless, giving you that alternate avenue of disruption rather than going full out aggression if we're looking at things like Raging Bolt and Miraidon weaving in this card, as these are some of the top archetypes in the format right now that already play lightning energy. Even if Rotom doesn't see immediate play, you just have to respect an effect like this. There are certainly going to be pockets in the meta where this attack can completely change games based on the main decks of the meta. Finally, I'm recommending Chien-Pao as a pickup, just 1 copy. I feel like in the format right now, it's absolutely trash, not really going to see any play. But all it takes is a disruptive stadium to come out, where we need to have additional outs to remove immediately in order to play the game, that makes Chien-Pao worthy include into a whole heap of decks. So the Chien-Pao is just a card for the binder right now, but get it while it's cheap. Onto the main A-specs I recommend picking up. First of all, we have the returning Scramble switch to the format. I think straight away this is a consideration card for Regidrago and possibly some other archetypes that utilize the Teal Mask Ogerpon engine as a switching card plus pseudo energy switch all wrapped into one. It may still end up being a little bit weaker than simply having the access to Prime Catcher, but because we have so many different ways to accelerate energy in the game right now, an effect like this could be welcome to springboard into some powerful attackers. Next up we have Precious Trolley. This allows us to search the deck for any number of basics and put them onto the bench immediately. This can be an absolute dream for decks that are very setup reliant, and especially a number of archetypes that don't have access to Buddy Buddy Poffin and have higher hit point basic Pokemon. Being able to use just one item card to get the lot is a huge amount of value and adds a lot to consistency. Using an Arven turn 1 and going for Trolley plus Forest Stone feels like an absolutely amazing setup option for not only that turn but also carrying on into the next one. Megaton Blower is an A-spec which is really intriguing to me. I think it just discards enough things, you know, it catches tools, special energy, and stadiums all in one card, that I actually think you'll find an opportunity for this card to be useful in almost every matchup you come up against. That being said, it's not going to have the same impact that most A-specs will have in the majority of the matchups. I think the fact that it's huge against Lugia is a big payoff, considering how powerful Lugia is in the format right now. The main reason I put it on the core essentials is that I do feel like there could be a more attacking focused build of Control coming into this next format that utilizes the likes of Regieleki that can recycle this Megaton Blower to be a win condition against Lugia. The other A-spec that I think is essential is actually the Miracle Headsets. I initially trashed this card and I don't think it's inherently that powerful, but very recent developments of the meta, most notably Sanders' build of Snorlax, which goes Rotomless, could definitely utilize an A-spec like this. In fact, if you go for a Pokestop approach with Snorlax and go even heavier on items, a card like Miracle Headset in addition to the likes of Palpad can be a wonderful option for you to get towards the bottom of your deck, but still ensure that you're seeing the supporters that you want to throughout the game. I'm actually a little bit terrified of the idea of a Pokestop Snorlax coming back into the format because many decks need to take out that Rotom to be able to carve out a nice prize map against all these block effects in addition to the walling ability Pokemon. The one core essential tool is Counter Gain. This was a really powerful card when it first came out, and as we know, there are archetypes in the game that are quite happy to go behind or force themselves into a position where they're behind on prize cards. You can do some cute plays, reducing the attack cost of Radiant Charizard, Blood Moon Ursaluna in addition to their abilities. It's going to be pretty decent on something like Slacking EX, which is a bit of a rogue archetype. But the main reason I'm mentioning this card is for how powerful I think it could be in a Pidgeot EX approach, because you just gain so many more cards in the pool that you can attack with, and it's so easy for this deck to remain behind on prizes, just inherently by how it plays. One of the standouts is the Lost Zone Bouffalance that can just remove an energy from play. We've seen this in previous iterations of Alessandro's Pidgeot builds of the past, and that was when you had to attach over 2 turns to it in a penny deck. So the fact now that you can get immediate access to this card in 1 turn is a really dangerous concept. Next up, there's Terra Orb. I'm recommending getting 4 copies of this card. I feel like in decks right now, it's only really going to be like squeezing in as a one-of, if at all. But as we see more Terrestrial Pokemon printed, we're going to see more Noctowl engines. We're going to see more powerful attackers, no doubt. And if ever we see a Terra card that has more inbuilt draw power, the value of this item skyrockets. So worth picking up that playset now. And then for stadiums, I think Gravity Mountain is just about good enough with that -30 reduction on Stage 2 Pokemon. Time and time again, we're seeing cards fall just under the mark of those Stage 2 KO ranges. Even though right now I only think things like Pikachu EX can take full advantage of this card, it does scream potential as a combo enabler to get those KOs on Stage 2s, which don't really seem to be going anywhere. Onto the main bulk of the set, which is actually the Believer buy list. These are cards that may prove themselves to be mid-tier contenders or have a good amount of potential. Unfortunately, that's where I think most of these EXs land. We'll start off with Ceruledge. It can ramp up to massive damage output for just 1 energy, but it's a really linear strategy that requires multiple 2-prize Pokemon, and you're locked to research for the majority of the game, so you find it difficult to weave in boss's orders, and even cards like Iono. So I think there's just too many high power level archetypes that can be tricksy around the Ceruledge, making me think it's a consistent beat stick, but doesn't really do anything that impressive. Then there's Archludon EX. It can power itself up with its Assemble Alloy ability, attaching 2 metal energy from the discard pile to your metal Pokemon in any way you like. It has that bulky 300 hit points and can remove its own weakness with its attack. But again, I feel like it falls short of the mark for the most part. Yes, it can create a difficult prize map for opponents, but you typically need some damage modifiers to make it a really dangerous attacking threat. And again, I feel like it's difficult into the Stage 2 matchups. Then there's Slacking EX. It's a huge 340 hit point colorless Pokemon. It can only attack if there are Pokemon EX and V in play, but that's rarely an issue. And its attack for 2 colorless deals 280, and you discard an energy from this Pokemon. There's Double Turbo Energy, there's Boomerang Energy, there's Jet, there's even Reversal Energy, which can work for 1 colorless at least for the Slacking EX, alongside things like Counter Gain. So I don't think it's too much trouble to get this Slacking swinging, and that 280 damage output is really good into basic EXs, Vs, and even V-Stars, but this archetype really falls down against opposing Stage 2s. You can try and do some funky gymnastics, maybe with Trumpet or Crispin, plus cards like Maximum Belt to have that huge damage mod to push us into range of some Stage 2s. But that seems like a massive combo to try and pull off. especially when the other stage 2s in the meta are so good at picking apart your board, either with Dust Noir or with damage counter placements. One of the big boasts of slacking is that you do have that fan rotom access to have really good options to get multiple slack off and Pidgey developed, and there is also that one prize slacking which can deal 240 for 3 colorless energy, which is perfect synergy with reversal. So definitely pick up the Paldea Evolved Evolution line if you want to get the slacking EX and play around with it. We actually have videos of the channel playing the slacking Archaludon and Ceruledge, so if you want to see some of those in action, go ahead and check them out. Then there's Milotic. There is a Feebas in the format that can ascend straight into this stage 1 Pokemon, and it has the really annoying ability preventing all damage and effects from attacks from your opponent's Terra Pokemon done to this one. It also has a respectable 160 damage attack for 1 water and 2 colorless, so it can do a respectable amount of damage to pressurize the opponent, while they try and come up with valid attackers. I think right now it's probably overshadowed by Cornerstone Ogerpon and Mimikyu, and even things like Farigiraf EX, but there can be those tournaments where this is just a worthwhile card to put into your deck list to win a certain matchup, if they don't respect this ability. Then we have Durant. This could be a nice one-of for some controlling archetypes instead of Chi-Yu EX plus Fire Energy. Its ability Sudden Shearing when it comes into play can simply mill 1 card off the top of your opponent's deck. So if you do have your opponent in that lock phase, you have the option to start penny looping your Durant to pressurize them. Or it could be a Mirror Tech card that takes up less spaces than Chi-Yu EX. It actually can also be a gate option for some Lost Zone builds, or maybe even Lugia with Legacy Energy as an option, where Durant can use its grass type coverage to KO some Charizard after they've taken a couple prizes, as it deals 120 plus 30 more for each prize card your opponent's taken. Then we have Black Kyurem EX. Its Ice Age attack is the one that I'm thinking about here for 3 colorless energy. You deal 90, and if your opponent's a dragon Pokemon, they're paralyzed. There's actually a ton of good dragons in the format. There's Regidrago, there's Raging Bolt, there's Dragapult EX. So some controlling decks could get a chip damage in with countergain DTE and buy themselves that turn using Paralysis alongside Iono. So it could be just another way that they get their like Rain Alakazam spam going, buying turns here, there, and everywhere. Those sorts of shenanigans are what I have in mind for Black Kyurem. For the other ace specs, there's Enriching Energy. This allows you to draw 4 on attachment. There aren't many archetypes that can afford that colorless attack cost, so ultimately I think it falls short in the meta right now, but could be a solid card for future. Same thing for the Amulet of Hope. Yes, it has a power effect. When your Pokemon is knocked out, you can search your deck for 3 cards and put them straight to hand. But we have multiple gusting effects. We have tool removal in a form of a Stadium and Lost Vacuum. And this is such a slow card. I'd much rather use my A-Spec proactively rather than wait for my opponent to make the most out of it. Then there's the Brilliant Blender. This is simply discarding the deck with 5 cards. This can be really helpful for Ceruledge, maybe even a Kofu deck if you want to get funky with Crabominable. But for the majority of decks, this isn't as powerful as some of the other A-Spec choices. And then Energy Search Pro, I was kind of on the fence with this one because I know there are some Goldengo lovers and some would say it's a tier 2 deck with some of the results it's had as of late. And this can be a huge burst of damage for a Goldengo player, especially early game, which was previously one of the challenges of the archetype where you were so focused on Pokestopping and Greninjaing so many energy in the discard pile for you to get early use of your superior energy retrievals. Now it should be an absolute breeze for Goldengo to get its first KO, as long as it can search this A-Spec, but it does make you warp your deck in a really bizarre way. You can't use Palkia V-Star as effectively, because you need to play so many different basic energy in your list, that I think you lose one of the core selling points the archetype has in the meta right now. So I'm actually a little bit cold on it. I don't think it's a fantastic option, but if you do love playing Goldengo, maybe it's worth getting just to try out. For the other traders, I think a playset of Dusk Ball is reasonable. We've seen Great Ball seeing play in the format, and this is essentially the same card. There are some like minor upsides maybe if your cards are being Iono to the bottom and you can guarantee what you're getting, but generally it's about the same power level and Great Ball has seen play. Then there's Cryano. It can search your deck for 3 EX Pokemon and reveal them, put them into your hand. Again, kind of a slow effect. We do have a good amount of ball search in the meta. I think one of the key selling points is getting stage 1 EXs out of the deck alongside something like a Pheasantipity EX at the same time. That could really help out decks like Goldengo if they want to try a different engine and get multiple coin bonus online. Maybe just the fact that you have Lumineon in the format means that you can sometimes find opportunities to get Fez plus Pidgeot plus your other stage 2 attacker, and that's when this card's going to feel absolutely bonkers. That requires a really specific hand and you're spending an Ultra Ball anyway, so it's actually not that big of an upside. I'm basically just saying 4 copies for potential future stage 1 EXs that need to swarm the board and get many of them into play. The other supporter is Surfer. It's a switch effect and it allows you to draw until you have 5 cards in hand. I think overall it's going to be overshadowed by the likes of Churro and Penny, possibly even Kieran as well, but there can be some specific archetypes that reduce their hand size enough where this can be a useful option, because at the very least it's a little bit of Iono proofing compared to these other pseudo switching supporters which can never really get you out of dead hands. Then there's the Chill Teaser toy and Meowstic. The ability of Meowstic allows you to discard a Chill Teaser toy to then have a gust effect, whereas the toy itself can only be played on your first turn going second, and it removes an energy from the opponent's Pokemon. This combination is a lot of deck slots and probably isn't just as good as playing Boss's Orders and Prime catches and whatnot, even coin flip catches to be honest with you, but there is a possibility of some kind of trapping archetype where you constantly use Meowstic as your gust and then a supporter for a different effect, like Eerie for example, to get rid of switching cards. Yeah, there's going to be some random combination that makes me think it's probably worth putting this card in the binder. You should always be a little bit more cautious about gusting effects like this. I think it's worth picking up 4 copies of the new Ancient Koraidon. I think it goes naturally into the Ancient Box archetypes that we've already seen. This gives Ancient Box fighting typing coverage, which is really important right now, to help deal with Iron Hands, Terapagos, Pheasantipity. So many reasons why this could be a strong option. The best thing here is it attacks for colorless energy, so there's no real commitment. You're not losing consistency by adding in this fighting attacker, which was kind of the case with your previous other options. Then there's the Sticky Bind Gastrodon. I've seen all sorts of opinions on this card. I still don't think it's that great, but its ability is still worth respecting. As we know, it can disrupt some stage 2s. I think one of the most interesting applications will be disrupting Archeops, but I'm not necessarily sure if any archetype actually has a space for a card like this right now. Things could be different if we get better evolution search. So again, another one for the binder. There's also the Togekiss, and I've heard some murmurings about this ability getting flippy with knockouts trying to take additional prize cards. This doesn't just work for attacks either, so if you want to combine this with Dusknoir and have a real wombo combo archetype, you can definitely cheese wins in that regard. We've seen things like Radiant Jirachi in the past be worthwhile, even if it's just one use. And we've seen with Pokestop Night Stretcher that it's actually pretty easy to get multiple stage 2s online if you build your deck accordingly. So if you want to go down that avenue and give it a whirl, I think picking up 3 Togekiss is pretty reasonable to get multiple of these into play and try and win big with those coin flips. Azumarill is a very efficient attacking option. Its Glistening Bubbles ability reduces its attack cost down to 1 Psychic if you have a Terra Pokemon in play, and it deals 230 damage. Honestly, that's just pretty solid. You can try and use some Dusknoir and Dusclops to improve that math. I've got both a Psychic and Water Marill on the buy list here from previous sets. Water so that you can use Irida if need be, and Psychic in case you want to use Tulip, which is that Psychic type Clara, where you can get 4 in any combination of Psychic Energy and Pokemon back. So possibly playing a split here makes sense. You can use Pikachu EX and Cornerstone Ogerpon to sort of offset putting a Terra in play and still make it difficult for the opponent to take those 2 prize KOs. So it does have the potential to be a mid-tier single prize option. Then just 1 copy of the Water Paldean Tauros. I'm mostly just interested in its first attack, Upthrusting Horns. It does 30 damage, and you put 2 energy attached to your opponent's active stage 2 Pokemon into their hand. Again, this just screams Pidgeot Toolbox. Removing 2 energy from a Charizard or a Dragapult could be a huge headache for them, and it could open up lines of play for that Lost Zone Bouffalont in future. Then we have the big Skeledirge from this set. It's a single prize option of Palkia V-Star with its attack. For 1 fire, 1 colors, you do 60 plus 20 more for each benched Pokemon. So this one prizer can deal a huge chunk of damage, and it even has access to the Terra Skeledirge EX that can ramp damage even further by discarding fire. So this is actually a major beat stick in the format. The issue, of course, being is that you're going to be quite a clunky multiple stage 2 to get everything firing, and it's really tough to be a stage 2 right now. There are Dusknoir decks everywhere, there's Radiant Greninja popping off. There's so many ways that this setup can be destroyed, and it's going to need constant reinvestment turn by turn because this single prizer is going to be knocked out so easily. The last mention is the new Gimmighoul. I believe it's the optimal one now. It can get energies out for you, so that seems better than the other current option that we have for 70 hit points. So Goldengo gamers, pick up your new gimmies. That's it for Surging Sparks then. Not too much on the core essentials, but plenty of Believer cards for you gamers out there who want to get creative. Let me know your thoughts down below as always. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.